everybody.
Hello, hello.
We are virtual yet again. This is coming in handy. This is even like Jeannie and I have this service like for when we do our own podcast. For some reason, we tried it and it didn't quite work for us, but really, really getting our money's worth for Yoga Farm. This is like
That's right.
the third or fourth time we've like been able to do this, not in the same space.
It's cool. Makes it easy to.
It does make it easy,
and it's high quality. Usually, it works pretty well.
It really is. Actually, I'm kind of surprised when I watched like the playback of the videos. I'm like, this is actually it looks pretty good.
It's
not
so
far. We're like, oh, this is surprising how good this looks for us.
I see little percentages by each of us, and they're like changing constantly. Is that like a buffer or something?
I think it's uploading. I think it might be buffering or like how much of is being uploaded or has uploaded. I think it's something like that.
I think it's like so that if you lose. It's like how much of the video and audio is synced at the same time and actually uploaded to the website so that we can pull it afterwards.
Well,
Cool.
Yeah.
I just made up an answer, and Josh is like, I actually know the answer.
No, that is what but you were right. You were totally right.
Cool. Any front desks, anything going on we want to talk about before we talk about? I don't know what's going on with you guys aside from
the whole family's sick here. It's just that time of the year, and it's been so cold, so that it's like we can't go outside anyway. So it's just been so. February break has been this last week, and I grew up in a place where February break didn't exist. Like we did not have February break, so I'm like, wow, amazing! It's like a spring break before spring break. If I was in school, I would love it. But as a parent, it's like, damn. No, it's actually been awesome. It's been fun, but it's been stuck inside. So it's just like you can't go do anything outside, or it's like you can only go to the science center so many times.
Your kids are prime science center age, aren't they?
It's true. They went today.
I've taken Luna. I mean, we've taken Luna a handful of times. It's like season pass or whatever, and it's just like she's only 3.5, so it's still kind of like new. So I'm like, yes, let's go.
This is so fun. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this weather is garbage. Like next week I'm looking at the weather. It's going to be like in the 30s. Like, not terrible, but like this week has just been like
it's been cold.
You're right. You can't
bring babies outside. You can't really like be outside with little kids or even like go sledding or anything like that because it's like a little bit too cold. So
right, I know, and there's like snow for it too. But like, it's in the like teens and single digits. It is nonsense.
One thing, Matt. No, go ahead.
We dumped about 300 pounds of salt. We drove to like a different county and found rock salt. We dumped 300 pounds on the parking lot at the clinic, and it's still a sheet of solid. Like we couldn't even break it up. So that's what kind of weather we've been having, man.
Yes,
I noticed that on like our driveway, where like, especially like a few weeks ago, where it was it was warm. It was like close to 40, so like it melted, and then it was like down in the teens overnight, and it was just a sheet of ice.
That's how my sidewalks are too right now. I feel like the worst neighbor ever, but because that day it rained and then it froze overnight. So then I couldn't I'm not out there with a chisel, gonna
well, that's our drive. And then it snowed, so it's nice and fluffy and light, and then it's just
ice.
Oh my god, it's terrible.
One thing, Matt, that I thought about you is I bought a corned beef and I'm making it today. So
buddy.
I saw it at Wegmans and I was like, wow, that's kind of early. But I was like, I'm getting it. I have to go for it.
Because I was there a few days ago and I saw like their St. Patrick's stuff is out.
Yeah.
I already have 2 corned beef briskets in our chest freezer that's in our back room because I wanted one for September, which is the halfway point between St. Patrick's Days. And I was like,
smart.
We'll call it St. Half-Tricks Day. But I can't find a corned beef. Like you can't find one.
It's true. They're not around.
No. So that's why I said as soon as I start seeing them every other week or so, maybe once a month, I'm going to start
loading up
them. Essentially, I already have 2. That's not even going to be used for St. Patrick's Day. They're just spare.
Boys are making me hungry.
I know, right?
And meanwhile, I'm seeing videos of the group that's in Guatemala, and they're just sitting themselves by the lake. I'm like,
just the opposite, exact opposite weather.
Oh my god, it's nonsense. But all that is not what we're here to talk about today. We are finally unveiling and rolling out a YFI men's group.
Yeah, baby.
That we are looking to start March 7th, Josh? Is that the date?
Yeah, I think that was the date.
Early March. So only a couple weeks is what we're looking to do. We've kind of been talking about this for, I mean, maybe a few months worth of staff meetings and such about like, oh, this would be a cool idea. I think there's a need and I think it would be good. And we're finally doing it. So then it became, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And I'm only speaking for me because I'm like, oh, I know what they are and I know the good they can be. But as far as facilitating, I'm like, ooh, I don't actually know. I have to learn how to do this, right?
Yeah.
So I've been kind of looking into like what to do essentially. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if either of you guys have any experience with anything like a specific men's group or anything remotely close to what that would be. If you have any experience with that at all.
I mean, jiu-jitsu, that's like a men's group.
Yeah,
it's funny. We, in a large way, I think that it really is genuinely that. Like we're cuddling. Sometimes we feel really, really bad and we cry. Other times we laugh.
Yeah, that's true.
I actually was talking to a friend of mine who's a social worker and therapist about like what a men's group would look like. We were talking about this independent of Yoga Farm doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we kind of were thinking about that was interesting, and I'd love to hear your feedback on, is like men tend to want to be doing something with one another as like kind of like a small hunting unit, you know what I mean? Or like like building a house or doing something like if we had like some wood and we could make like a prehistoric hut together. Like I would definitely show up for that without like any hesitation. I mean, like that's cool,
Definitely.
That's so funny. I don't know what we were talking about or how it came up, but something very similar or a video in my algorithm or something was like, for women, when they get together to have like a support system, they can just get together and there doesn't have to be a planned activity. Where men can get that emotional support structure, but there has to be an invitation with an activity involved or like a preconceived, like, oh, we'll get together and do this thing. And then it ends up not really being about the thing. Like, I remember last year and a couple years ago, I was hanging out with some friends. I'm like, oh, come over and watch the Masters on Sunday, whatever. And then like, it was warm enough we could sit outside, and it ended up being like we didn't even care about the score or what was going on, and we just kind of got caught up in hanging out. And then we did it again for another tournament, like in May, and I said goodbye, and they left. I went inside. I was like, oh wait, this is like a one-stroke tournament. Like this is going down to the wire, and it's like we didn't even care. Like we just we had that activity as like, oh, this is why we'll get together. But we ended up like not, I guess, needing it is the phrase, but yeah, it's funny how like, oh, let's come over and watch the game or do this, or we'll build a yurt, and instead of just like, oh, come over and we'll talk and share.
Yeah.
I mean, if you throw like steak and a cigar in there, I mean, I'm like, yeah, let's talk,
Right.
That makes it harder to say no, for sure.
Yeah, I've also found like that's also good, like conversation, like I guess lubricant is the word. It's like, here's the steak sizzling and a cigar, and that's just like, and maybe a little bourbon. You know what I mean? It's like conversation, helps settle people into an environment where it's like, oh, this is what this environment is for. It's very like leisurely and also like, what's going on with you type kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's interesting you say, because the only experience I've ever had in a men's group is when I was a kid, my dad was in a men's group at our church. And basically what it was on Saturday mornings, and it would be at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings.
Whoa.
And it was like all as like it was like a commitment thing, like where it was like, we'll you don't have to be away from the house, because like the days, usually all these guys were working during the week. So it's like their weekends are pretty filled with children's activities, basketball games, that kind of stuff. And so it was like before all of that started, and it would prevent you from tying one on too hard on Friday night, you know. So it'd be like a little accountability, you know, like for these men of God, you know. So it worked, you know. So my dad would bring us every once in a while, and I'd be like, oh my God, so early, like holy hell. But it ended up being like a really beautiful thing where it was just men showing up, and they would read the gospel for the week, like what was going to be read on the week, and then they'd talk about it, and then the floor was open. Like it was just like the floor was totally wide open for anyone to say anything. And so it was really inspiring to see like the way that all of these, because it's like shared problems, right? Like where it's like, this is difficult for me, and I know that all of you are having similar struggles. So, or even just in the same ballpark. So it's like, it's not like you're talking to someone who maybe knows you so well that you could hurt their feelings with this information, or like there's like enough distance, but also commonality, like coming from a sincere place of like looking to be there for each other, which is like kind of what it seemed like. And it was really, honestly, it was the most vulnerable, because it's like my friend's dad's essentially, right, yeah. Which is like, and being like, I'm saying, I think I was probably in like 4th or 5th grade or like 6th grade. And so going to see that was like really powerful. It was like an interesting, something I never could think of. And it reinforced that like having friends was important, and like that there's like that brotherhood and that kind of, because I think sometimes you can, as men, I think that they did for sure. It's not like you're going to talk. You don't want to be like complaining to your wife, or see it as complaining to your wife or your kids about like your wife or your kids, you know, like so it's like a group of men who have that shared perspective, and shared maybe some advice, you know, like, or not, or just like to say it to somebody who might have the similar situation. So that was my experience. And I think that this is an opportunity to kind of find our own way with it, where people can even have an opportunity to be more vulnerable by they don't have to leave the comfort of their home, even, you know, like you can be in a space that allows you to, you know, I feel like it's a easier, even gentler invitation to that vulnerability. Although, you know, it will definitely start with getting to know each other, you know, like, and having some kind of shared experience. So I think that what we're going to try to do is, or at least what I'd love to do, is introduce, you know, different breath practices. Maybe we can have Brian come one month and show a simple qigong flow, and just like simple things that we can do together that then like will allow us to then get into, you know, either, you know, sharing or whatever the case may be that month. So it's an experiment for sure, and I think it'll be interesting, because also our demographic and community currently is swaying much more on a feminine direction, and so we'll have to see if the word gets out, you know.
Yeah, it'd be really, you definitely, there's so many things you said that were amazing. So yeah, we skew feminine pretty hard in our
so
communities. So like part of the selling or the advertisement or like message should be like, bring your husband, you know what I mean? Like tell your husband about this, right? Because like that's who we have involved in our communities primarily. Yeah, I think I've never, I mean, Brian, it's funny you bring up like martial arts as like a men's group, and I think my experience with that is with like men's groups is more along the lines of that, like any sort of group activity or class or course or something, but that's not this primary intention where it's like, this is a men's group. This is more like, oh, this is a place for this activity, and then the relationships and, you know, start to form organically around the activity. So I have no experience with this other than like either organized sports or clubs or I guess cigars and steaks is the closest thing with a handful of people is really the only thing. But yeah, I mean, I found what I think one of the things I think could be so good about it is, I think Josh, you said that like hearing someone talk about what they have going on, either advice, you'd be like, oh, I've dealt with this exact issue and this is what I did, take
Right.
it or leave it. Or you get a room of people that say like, wow, none of us have done this before, we are all experiencing this kind of like either personally or like, you know, through someone else the first time. So it's
Right.
like, again, even though there's no like answers or solutions, maybe it could just be like a shared space to like, wow, we are holding that space for you because we don't know what we do either, you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
even without ideas or advice, I think it could be really beneficial to our community and you know, whoever chooses to be part of that community too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like it's I think that and having people from different walks of life too is really nice. Like I think that that's another strength and advantage that would be kind of cool about our situation is while the women that maybe are bringing these men to this group have something in common. Like that's not to say that all these men are yogis themselves or are in the same mindset or socioeconomic situation as us. And so it's like I think that there can be a lot of shared perspective about in an era where it feels like if you live online within the algorithms, there's so much opportunity for labeling and then bucketing and then separation and division and I think that leads to fear and isolationism and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is like almost the opposite idea. It's like hopefully we can present a space of that way.
One thing that's kind of interesting is I don't know if there's some sort of like local cultural tipping point that's being reached, but this is literally like the fourth men's group targeted sort of thing that's hit my sphere. Like our direct primary care guy is starting like a monthly man cave meetup or something like that. I forget the exact. And then there was another, like, there's enough of them that I was getting them confused where I was like, oh, wait, are you that men's group or the. And like they were going off into the woods to eat a bunch of substances and like see God a little bit out there, and it's
Yeah, I
just
don't
really
hate that.
interesting. I think it's great. I think that it's maybe really necessary. Like maybe a lot of us are sort of like, yeah, we're not well right now. We need to talk a little.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I
is
mean,
this all really happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I think Josh, you said something else where like the common thread in our participants and members is like they're yogis, right? And it's like
Right.
if you take their masculine identifying spouses and put them in a room, it's like, what do they have in common? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
do they?
right.
Where it's like, oh, these two women are friends, and then they set their husbands up on a play date, almost essentially.
Right.
And it's like, what do
It
you
is
have?
sort of how it feels.
Right. And it's like, do you have anything in common? Or like, not really. And it's like, you know what I mean? So there's that, like, which I think is a fantastic opportunity, like you said, to get people from different walks, different experiences that aren't initially like, oh, I am totally on a yogic type of path. And then they're like, well, my spouse isn't, and he's on some other thing. And then so like, and someone else is like, well, my spouse is on this other thing. It's like, well, let's get him in a room together. Let's get him into space together. So that potential, I think, is really exciting and kind of terrifying. I got to admit, like, if I'm being honest, it's a little like, okay, how would I approach or how would I deal with like someone I disagree with on a fundamental level? You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, how do you hold space for that? How do you like try to be kind and try to be understanding and supportive? Because that's like the whole point of this, right? Like this, it's not really good if we're like, hey, let's have a men's group where we're support each other, and then someone comes like, not you though, you gotta
You
leave. You know
cannot
what I
come
mean?
into this. Yeah,
Right.
actually.
It's kind of not exactly at all what we're trying to do. So like that part of it um seems challenging and interesting and scary.
I think that might speak to the need with guys for like a certain point of triangulation, because that is one thing about jujitsu that's really fascinating is like you'll have a young cop who's about as straight edged and you know, like just think of every stereotype you can imagine about like
Yeah.
a young white dude cop.
Yeah.
And they're rolling with like a, you know, dreadlocked stoner, and they become good friends, like because
Right.
they're as different as they could get culturally, but you know, and it's just a bizarre sort of a social milieu where like, you know, you've got professionals rolling with like criminals, rolling with cops, rolling, and I really like that about it. You know, it's kind of like I have friends that I certainly wouldn't have probably encountered or had the opportunity to really get to know that way.
Yeah,
But
well, and also with the help of that, we are a yoga organization. It's like there is this, our mission is, like to actually help people, try to help themselves and uh, to make bring people together in a certain sense, and bring people together through a men's group is maybe making space for the differences that we have. And it takes a certain level of maturity to participate in a men's group at all, and like a type of I don't know, bravery in a sense, to like take a leap of faith like that to join us. So I think that it will be a particular type of person who is and really it's an opportunity for personal growth, right? Like, to put yourself out there at all is giving yourself an opportunity, because it might feel like, what am I doing, like, to a certain extent. But that's how I felt when I first did yoga. I was like, what am I doing? I can't, like, I cannot touch my toes. Like, what am I doing in this yoga teacher training? Like, how I am not qualified enough to be here. But I love the breathing. I love the idea, and I think that there's space for growth here, and also accountability. It's like when you have a group of people who you keep coming back to, who you're telling a story to. It's like the fact that you have someone to come back to tell the next part of the story to, like, can kind of influence you to keep on a path, and it's like playing on a team, or like having a common goal, like, allows you to keep towards that goal in a way, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring up like accountability,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that I don't know if it's ego or what in I mean, I also speak for myself as a man. Um, but like if I was bringing a problem, an issue, or something, I was talking to a group about it, and then a month later, I'm like, oh, how is that problem going? And if I said, oh, it's exactly the same. There's no
Yeah.
change. I did nothing, or I did very little, and it's still a problem, and I will complain about it. At some point, you in your head are going to say, oh, am I going to bring this to the group to say I've done nothing? You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like that accountability where I think can go a long way. I mean, for me especially, because if I'm like, okay, if I'm going to show up at this group and like talk to a group about it, I better have at least tried something, or I better have like tried to put myself out there, or like made changes. That accountability is huge. And I think it's something that is hard to come by, because I think sometimes maybe in friends, like small circles, we default to like, oh, let's just listen and not like give advice or hold accountable. Say, okay, you've talked to me 5 times about this. What are you actually doing about it? Like, really? Like, I want to be here. I
Yeah.
want to listen. I want to support. But like, we're at the point now. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
I think the almost anonymity, where like we may not know these people initially right away, could be helpful, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like this isn't someone I'm gonna see them once a month, or if that, that could be helpful and very interesting as far as like how can you know they make steps to change the things they want to change, even though they might not feel you know motivated otherwise.
Right.
I think accountability really breeds closeness too. Like a good buddy of mine and I are sort of accountability buddies with this one particular thing, which is that we fast together, you know, but we don't
Oh.
live together. We both have families and kids and everything else. And I've actually like never even been to this dude's house. We text and we train together. But then once every few months, he and I will like sort of text each other, and we'll be like, all right, you know, we're getting after it at 8 p.m. tonight. We start fasting. and then we'll go for 72 hours. And, like roughly every 12 hours will be like, 24 hours down, brother.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we roll and we usually dine and break the fast together.
That's
And it's
awesome.
funny because he's like, I would count this dude amongst one of my best friends, even though we're like in every other range, we're not particularly that close, like we
Yeah.
train together and that's about it. But having that particular accountability to one another breeds a real, like, there's sort of like we've gone through something together now,
Yeah.
a few
Well,
times.
shared let's say trial and hardship might be heavy words for something like that, but the same, you've been through the same kind of like thing you're both trying to do, and that definitely like already it's inherently like, oh, we both kind of understand like the struggles of what we're trying to do.
And neither of us would probably complete the task by ourselves. Like that's not for nothing. That accountability keeps us honest to it, because it's like plenty of times I would definitely be like, all right, 24 hours is good. I'm gonna eat,
Yeah.
But then it's like, but I'm not gonna break the fast.
I can't let him down. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he would never let me hear the end of it.
Yeah. There's something to be said for like, well, I said I was going to do this, and if I stop doing it, who's going to notice? Nobody. Until you have a group that will say, how you doing? And like, I don't want to go back to them and say, I haven't done anything, or I stopped trying. You know what I mean? It's almost like failure is okay, but stopping trying for me at least, would be like, oh, come on. And that's what the group is for. Right?
Yeah. I feel like also men's group, I was just thinking like, I feel like there's an interesting and I guess probably more, maybe not more back in the day, but definitely more, where it's like in terms of unburdening yourself, like where it's like saying something that, like, have you ever had something that you like been putting off for a super long time, and you don't even want to talk about it because you're like, oh my god, like I can't even think about that thing that I have to do. And then when you tell somebody, even just telling somebody that you have to do it, like makes it feel a little bit better. Like it's like, all right, shoot, like okay, I can actually do this. And like I think that's a really valuable part of like going to therapy, is like having an opportunity to really unburden yourself to somebody who's not in your social circle, who isn't like going to judge you or make you feel any type of way about it, but more like just hear you and be a mirror for you about like what's going on and whatever type of therapy you're receiving. But I feel like in a men's group, it's like no one in the group is the higher up. There isn't like anyone in the group who is like trying to teach anyone like anything, like in a way where it's like, hey, we're all just men showing up here to have that shared experience. And like, I am not the answerer of your problems, or either is he, or either is he, is either is he. And it's like more like, but we can all hear that this is happening and relate to the fact that we probably also are having things like this happening. And like that, like makes it a little less pressured. There's like a more of a space for that. And especially with the anonymity and like the distance between us, there like is even more of a freedom to kind of be like, yeah, man, like this shit sucks. Like this is going on with my life, and like it feels overwhelming. And it's like to be able to share those type of things is I think will be really valuable to people. And it also it's almost breaking a social norm to share personal things with other human beings, which is like so sad. Like that it feels, I think the pandemic did a number on separating people to get all together. And I think it's ironic that we're using a medium like Zoom to be able to kind of break that wound back, like bring that wound back to health, and be able to, because I think people need it. There's so many studies that show how valuable community and interacting with other people is for your mental health. And I think that especially for us who work from home, and for anyone who is keeping their distance, I think communities in general are smaller and smaller, and this is a way to provide that for someone who maybe feels overwhelmed by that in-person situation that might be available to them in their local area. So I don't know, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think there is so much power that we don't realize in the phrase when you hear it from someone else. Say like, "Wow, that shit sucks, man."
Yeah,
Like that. I think there's so much power in that to hear it from other people that we almost don't realize. I am as introverted as they come. And man, like when Jeannie's not here, if I don't have to go somewhere, man, it is really easy to not want to go anywhere for anything.
Yeah.
Like even this morning, I'm like, oh, I need to go grocery shopping because I haven't been in a week and a half. And
Yeah.
but I'm like, what's in my freezer? Can I make it another day? Do I want to do it now? I don't even know. So like, but whenever I have also been in a group, in a community, my initial thought is like, ugh, I got to go do something in people. But 99% of the time, I feel so much more energized and I feel better having been around people, right? Like
Yeah.
having been in community, in group. And I often have to reflect and just like think, we are social creatures. Like we really are. Like there's no like rugged individual. Like we all depend on someone. And at some point that boils down to even uh, an emotional group a group to support each other emotionally with anything like this. So yeah. So now Josh, we've been kind of, I say we, but I mean you've definitely I read that document that you made up and it was fantastic. So I don't want to say we when you did most of this work. What kind of things are we looking to do? Because I think, we think men's group, and this is, I don't know if we've actually said it, but it is going to be virtual.
Yes.
So we are going to do it through Zoom.
Yep.
We're going to open it up to, I mean, initially, I think I would love to eventually at some point have a thing where it's in person. Maybe in the future, that's where it will go. But definitely initially, we're going to test it out on Zoom, like we've been doing everything else with YFI.
Yeah.
And we think like, oh, men's group, just show up and talk or something. But like you've like, I mean, that document was great. What kind of activities or what kind of things are we looking to do? So if anyone's spouse is listening, they can say, hey, go to this thing because here's the things you'll be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I just got inspired one day and just thought like, what would be valuable for me if I had an hour to give, and was looking to do something like this. And I guess like I think what would be valuable is, like I said, kind of had a shared either movement or breath practice to start, like a short 15-20 minute practice, maybe even shorter, depending on what we have planned. But then just, checking in, like essentially like allowing that to land. People, it's kind of like a welcome into the space type of thing, and really like just quick check in with people, how they're feeling, any major wins or challenges that they're having, based off whatever we talked about in the last meeting. The first meeting will obviously be setting the scene for what to expect, but then like a focus. So like thinking like, through books, through different things that we're interested in, mindfulness, thought leaders, like whatever we are turned on by, like that inspire us, bringing that to the group, and maybe a guest speaker or an expert in some type of topic, or like somebody we can interview, but also just group discussions on topics. If there's something huge going on in the world that people want to talk about, like it's really, I think of it as it doesn't have to be so rigidly structured, but also like having some prompts and some opportunities to get almost icebreakers, and if it's not the lamest version of that, is important, because I think that it will take a second. It might not feel so natural at first, but like breaking into small groups also I think would be helpful, to maybe feel like you don't have to share everything about everything to everyone right away, and get an opportunity to really get to know other people in the group, by breaking up into smaller groups. And then like I think having an open floor for any problems people are trying to deal with and don't have any solutions for. Like we might not have the solution, but like we said, having a group of people, you have a better opportunity to have someone who might have experienced something similar to give some perspective for it. And like I think that it's important that we would mention that nobody's an expert here. That it's like it'll be like wisdom by numbers, in a certain sense. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts about it is it's a pretty low pressure, low stakes situation where you can just kind of show up and be, you know. And also sharing, I feel like, is optional. Like that was one of the things that I think that was really nice too, is like if you don't feel like it, you know, sometimes just being in a group and hearing other people provides perspective for your situation, and you can gain a lot from that as well. So obviously the intention would be to share and get to know each other, but it's everybody's on their own journey. So that's the kind of what I've had in mind, and I definitely am. You know, I'm so excited to get to share the space with Matt and anyone else who's interested in the community to come in and give some space to people.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, well said, Josh. Yeah, I kind of like the initial anonymity, right? It's like, would I say something to some people that I know or some friends or people I share things with or talk to? Or could I be like, I don't know any of these people. So I could be like, here's something I've been dealing with that, like, you don't know me at all. So I could be like, or even just lie and say, like, I know someone that has dealt with this. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like that anonymity can be helpful. Um, and also, this is just going to be a great exercise in like putting the ego aside, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how many times do we hold back from discussing anything, right? That may be challenging for us. Um, when we're like, oh, how would this make me look, or how does it make me look to other people? And then there's that weird thing that I don't know if it's just guys. I think it's just people in general that care about, oh, you know, this person's going to think this of me if I share this problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think there's a lot of that initially around. And I think that's something we're going to try to challenge and overcome, where it's like you could have, you know, feel free to share anything. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if the problem is going to be getting people to share or people sharing too much. You know what I mean? It's like both. They're like, you know, it's like, where's the spectrum going to be? But it's very interesting. But I think if we're going to be stereotypical with men in a men's group, it'll be like almost pulling teeth. Like, let's share it. Come on, like, what's going on? Like, and that's why I think the challenge is going to be you and I as facilitators to be like, you know, if the any wins, any L's you're taking this week, any losses, it's like, well, here's an issue I've been having. Here's a struggle. Here's a challenge. Even just thinking about that in my head, being like, am I gonna like, what could I share or talk about in a group? And I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. I'm like showing up expecting people to be like, what's going on with you? I'm like, I better be ready to show up to do the same in a way,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's the thing also, though, is like I think one of the things that it's a men's group because people are participating in it, you know, like, and if they don't participate, if nobody participates, it'll be a really short meeting, you know, like, and you know, like, and that is, we're still going to hold the space, but like, me or you are not going to be like holding the floor for like, you know, like for the entire time. Cause like really what we're here to do is like to hear people so we can give an opportunity for people to share. And obviously, like, if they're there, we hope that there's an intention to participate and share your experience, because that's we're trying to make okay, and like that's definitely good to make clear in advertising for it, and you know, sharing what the opportunity actually is. And I think that you know, I'm excited to see where it goes, because it really is totally free form, you know, like in a certain sense, where it doesn't have to be anything to anyone. You know, like if it,
Right.
you know.
You know
It's
what I
funny.
think you'll
I'm
find
thinking.
is,
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
oh, sorry, one thing that I've noticed in the recent kind of crops of students that we've had
Yeah.
is that, like, if somebody shows up, like, certainly, and I'm thinking specifically men in this case, they're ready. Like, they're gonna talk a lot, and like more than you think. And I think
Definitely.
that part of that is that there's like this new, um, I think that there's a new awareness where like guys are like really genuinely sort of seeking right now, at least in the orbits I'm in, where it's like, you
Yeah.
know, they're trying to deal with their mental health, like most guys in my orbit are aware of like emotional workload and all these things that like we struggle with, and it's like so it's interesting. I suspect that the people who show up are going to be there with you. You know what I mean? It's not
Yes.
like the kind of thing where they might accidentally wander in there. Or,
Yeah, no,
be like, what the
or
fuck is this?
their wife's going to be holding their arm behind their back and be like, "Get the fuck in the meeting."
You can see their wife just looming over them.
I'm picturing like me sitting here, and then on this side, you see like an elbow off screen, like nudge you.
Come on,
this is what we
your turn.
About.
Yeah, exactly.
Blink 3 times if you're under duress right now.
This is what
you see something you're just blinking like dash, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, that'll be one of our lessons. Morse code.
Morse code through eye blinking. Like, how do I say wife is listening? I did have the thought. I was like, what if we get 5 people, and then we're like, okay, guys, like here's the next step. We're gonna like breakout room, pair up, whatever, and just like kind of talk and introduce, and like crickets, right? Like, no. Which in hearing Brian, you talk about that, I'm thinking you're right. If people are showing up, there is already a willingness to participate.
Yeah.
So I think if and when people show up, I don't think we're going to have that problem. I think no, I don't. It's just going to be really exciting to kind of explore again. Like, I have no real experience with a formal group. You know what I mean? About like holding court, not court, but like, hey, I'm facilitating. This is the next step. Like, I haven't done this, so like, I'm excited to do it with Josh. I'm so thankful that like you are equally as excited about this.
Yeah,
and because it's like doing it alone seems so daunting, and I'm like, okay, Josh is there with me, thank God, because I don't have to do this by myself.
Yeah, man, strength in numbers for sure. That's what I think. That's the whole idea.
Right? Isn't kind of the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that honestly, I think about it as more of a we know that what can we do to lighten people's load? Like it's like what are we providing in our nonprofit to make people's lives a little lighter and to allow them to process everything that's going on and the responsibilities and stresses that everyone holds. It's like it's like not all candy and rainbows out there. And I think that is where if we build it, they will come, like in a certain sense. And man,
you had me at the baseball metaphor.
I know, right? but I think, and if not, like we're still offering something, right? It's like the same thing as doing a yoga class that people don't show up to, right? You can't control the outcome, but we can control our intention. And so like the intention for us is to do what we're going to do. And I think that, it's really like a space for kindness. If there's one thing that I can, and compassion and empathy is like really what I want it to be. And hopefully inspiration, and maybe some valuable, breath practices, meditation techniques and movement practices to allow people to maybe bring those into their daily, habits and schedules and just those little nuggets that we can we have value from, is I think what we can offer. And I think we know a lot of really smart and interesting people that would be interested to share as well, because men can learn from women too. It's like there are opportunities here for us all to learn. So that's how I'm seeing it.
Funny, Josh said something like, oh, Brian, if you want to come one month, be like, Brian, you're obviously invited to all months.
Of course.
I would love to. I mean, I can use the support too. I'll be in there. I'll monopolize one of you guys. I'm going to be talking about my problems the whole ass.
That's right.
Well, I was going to say, at the absolute least, it's going to be me and Josh hanging out and talking.
That's right.
And then it's like, oh, I'm sure Brian will be around at some point. I'm like, I know a few guys that I could like easily be like, yo, you're coming to this thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to drag you to it. Almost like their spouse. Like, both of these friends I know are not married and don't have spouses. Like, be like, hey, make this person come to this thing. Like, I will guilt trip them into the initial participation.
It is interesting because the guys I know that I feel like could benefit the absolute most, and I mean like it would be unbelievably useful for them, are also the men that are the hardest to sort of target and reach with such a thing, right? And you know, like I won't give any identifying characteristics, but like I have a good friend of mine in mind where I'm like, he could use this. Like he needs a support, a space of kindness and support to actually, you know, get real, genuine, like heart to heart communication. And it is like the one thing where I bet if I threatened him physically, like we'd have a fight. You know what I mean? Like it would be a fight. It'd be like, I'm not doing that. So like I'm thinking about like, how can I get, like, now I've got a mission. I want to bring this dude in.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe I'll trick him.
Yeah, well, it's like I think that we could do a whole week on how to trick our friends into coming. You know, like you know, tell them that they get free tickets to something or like a free bag.
Wait a minute, this isn't the free booze, beers, and billiards club? Oh man! Oh, now you're here and you can't leave.
Yeah, tell us your problems.
Right, and, like I'm just. And also, like, I'm thinking of, like, who I can... The phrase rope into this, it comes to mind. But maybe that's what it would be initially, and maybe not after a while. But also, like, I mean, I have heard my friends talk to me about things. I'm like, but maybe Josh hasn't. Or maybe someone else that's involved, that will participate, hasn't. That has a perspective to offer that I don't have because of my life path so far. You know what I mean? So, like... It's just, I think it could be and is an exciting opportunity to be in a place, you know, I don't know if men are just afraid of emotional support or think there's some sort of stigma with wanting it or needing it. But I think it's got tremendous benefits. And I think we're on the verge of doing something cool with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's very old school that would be in any way still the case. You know, like that there would still be that barrier or that stigma to... I mean, things have changed so much in even just the last 40 years in terms of like social norms and sharing feelings and like things like, especially because of how narcissistic our social media and like social landscape is about sharing, almost oversharing about your life, you know, right? So like I think that some people might be like, ugh, I don't need to share another thing about my life. But those things are all fake, you know, like social media is a surface level representation of your highlight reel of your, you know, of your life. And I think that that alone leads to a comparative depression situation for, I think, most adults like that exist in the world, have to go online and see how everyone else is doing, but and try to do the mental math of how they feel and where they're at. And like I think that if anything, this can be an authentic space for people to share that part of their lives, right?
Do you know what just occurred to me? So I don't know if I've talked about this on the YFI pod, but I'm sober, and you know, one of the best tools I used, and especially in early recovery, but throughout the whole time, is AA.
Yeah.
And it just occurred to me that AA is essentially a model, and some of them are like men specific, some of them, you know, are not, but it's a model that's existed for almost 100 years, and it's wildly successful, you know, and that people are able to go and anonymously speak about their life experiences, problems, things that worry them, things that they're happy and proud of. And you know what? When you go to those meetings, a lot of dudes talk about a lot of feelings, and it's like a safe space for them to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just occurred to me because I was sitting there and I was thinking about like, well, what models? And when you were describing it, I was like, holy shit, that's like AA, but not necessarily for alcoholics,
Well,
Yeah.
right. It's exactly, and I mean, really, honestly, it is that is an example, 100% of the psychology of a group, like
Yeah.
where it's like to be able to share, um, because there's a common thread there, right? That everyone is healing from an addiction, and that common thread is a vulnerability that everyone is sharing in the group that allows them to be like a little bit more honest, and even maybe more honest than they would ever be with anyone that they actually know, because they're like, oh, those people aren't addicts, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like they haven't had that experience, and they're not healing from something like that, or they're not trying to stay sober, or whatever the motivation for being at the meeting at that moment for that person. Because I think there's a lot of different reasons that people go, but I think that it is. I think that as authentic as we can make it, right? I think in finding a common thread that we all exist in this time
Super
together,
cool.
yeah, could be very valuable. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I'm going in with. I mean, I've heard this phrase for so long: 100% engagement, 0% attachment,
Yeah.
and that's
Mm.
really it is. I mean, I'm going to go into this thing as a facilitator and participant, which is kind of like a player coach kind of role, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. But I think I've been thinking about it as a facilitator, and it was just really in this moment where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a participant too.
Right.
And like, how does that change my perspective on the whole, on how to run it and the benefits that I see? Like, how, if I went in as just a participant, like, what would I bring? And that's different
Mm-hmm.
than if I'm like, oh my God, I'm in charge, half in charge of running it. Totally different. Um, but it's really right now where I'm like, okay, like think of it as a participant. Like, how would I go in as a person whose wife was like, you should go to this thing, and actually you're going to this thing, so you're going to do it. How would I? What would I bring? You know what I mean? Like, how would I approach it, and what would I talk about? You know what I mean? And that's kind of like that's now kind of what I'm thinking about. And um, yeah, I think you know what? I think honestly, if it's just you and me, Josh, for a year,
Yeah.
that's okay. I
We'll do
think
great. Yeah, we'll have
I
great
don't think it's going to
conversation.
be. I think there's going to
No,
be more.
Brian will be there too, and then we can just
I
turn on
got you, boys.
we'll
I'm
turn
in
on the
it.
recorder, and everyone will just be a new dude cast, and that'll work out perfect. We'll be able to double task and get something knocked out. Um,
Right.
but I think that it's I'm excited to hold space,
Yeah.
because I think even us in it, all of us in our different experiences, I'm always so grateful I get to spend time talking to you guys, because I think that there is it isn't as somebody who's a householder, like with 4 kids, like it's a lot of my conversations are to children, like, and like 90% of my conversations are with my children, so it's or my wife, and so it's just not that, for sure, like, and that is really a blessing. And I think that, and also men I respect, like, and I think that that's to have a mutual respect between men, is something that I think all men desire. Like, in a certain sense, is to be heard and not judged, but to be seen as someone who's also trying to make it through this the best they can. Like, because I think that is a great place to start. And so, yeah, if nobody comes, we'll get to talk about what's happening with our oligarch overlords. And
we're all navigating this at the same time together.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice. All right. Any men's group final thoughts? I mean, Josh, you kind of just nailed it. Brian, you got anything else? Any other thoughts before we kind of sign off?
Other than that, I'm kind of sold. Like I'm looking forward to the first one. Yeah.
Yes, it's gonna be
Nice.
it's gonna be great.
Awesome. So yeah, so we're shooting for early March. I think the 7th is a Friday, and I think we're
Yes.
thinking Saturdays.
Yeah, I think the 8th, I think, was going to be the
I
first
think the
one.
8th is the target date.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's listening to this, there will be many
Posts
marketing,
and
posts, information about this in the upcoming weeks leading up to it. But yeah, early March is when we're looking for it, looking to start it. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like I'm so kind of nervous, and I'm just telling myself I'm excited because my body doesn't know the difference. And you know
That's
what?
right. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, 100% engagement, no attachment. It's going to be great.
That's right, Matt.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So for the Wi-Fi pod and the dude cast talking about the men's group coming up, this is Matt.
This is Josh.
This is Brian.
Oh,
oh.
Alrighty. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you. See you guys.
Thanks, gentlemen.